Hi guys, hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Sandra. So if you're new here, then on this channel I tell you about great books, authors and literature in general, share my opinion, help you find something to read, do a little bit of analysis, a little bit of everything. So you're welcome, enjoy your stay. Today we'll be talking about this great book by Donna Tartt once again. So I already did my first video on her first novel, The Secret History. So if you haven't seen that, please go back and check it out. It's very cool and I think somewhat important to understand her third novel, The Goldfinch. So we'll be talking quite a long time about this novel. I can see that because there are a lot to say. There are so much research that has been done on this book, on its style, on how it's written, on the themes, so you can find just a lot of that on the internet. Today I will try to do my best to describe it to you as well as I can, based on my research, based on what I know and my personal opinion. So I hope you learned something new today. So usually in the beginning of the video I talk a little bit about the author, but as I talked about the Donna in the first video, you can just go back there, check it out, see all about her. I also talk there about dark academia genre, which is also can be seen in The Goldfinch. So as you might know, Donna has only 3 novels so far. And so the first one, The Secret History, I've done a video on. It was released in 1992. Then 10 years later, Donna released her second novel, Little Friend. Tell me, by the way, if you need a video about that. And her third novel, The Goldfinch, was released in 2014. So, and it scored like enormous appreciation all around the world, just like her other books. But this time it won big time. So it won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, amongst many other awards, and it sold 30,000 copies just in a few first weeks of release, so it was just phenomenal. Let's talk about the historical context of the book. So for the book that's based in our times, it has very little historical context whatsoever, so there are no news, no events that actually happened that are described here. However, the main event that sets the triggers all the plots, so the terrorist attack on Matt, where the main hero gets with his mother, it is actually an allusion to the events of the tragic events of 11th of September of 2001, when the Twin Towers fell in New York. So there are no certain parallels, but both are terrorist attacks and both are set in New York. And let's talk about the books which The Goldfinch is compared to or has allusions to. So, The Goldfinch is Bildungsroman. What is that, you might ask? So, Bildungsroman is a novel about a hero growing up, about becoming an adult, learning about the world. And so in that, The Goldfinch is being compared to the works of Charles Dickens. And as you might know from the first video, Charles Dickens was one of Donna's favorite authors. It is also being compared to Harry Potter in a way, mostly because The Goldfinch contains the allusions to Harry Potter. So for example, the main hero, Theo Decker, his best friend Boris calls him Potter because of the glasses he wears. And of course, when we're talking about Donna Tartt, we couldn't have gone without our Russian literature, without our favorite Fyodor Dostoyevsky. So in the book, Boris, the best friend, he reads the novel Idiot by Fyodor Dostoyevsky and they discuss it. And also there's a theory that the main character himself, so Theo Decker, think about its name for a minute. This might be a straight allusion to Fyodor Dostoyevsky because Theodore is a variation of a name Fyodor, and well, their last names, so they both start with D. I mean, that's a little stretched, but could be, who knows. And so if we're talking about more modern works written in postmodernist genre like The Goldfinch, so it's of course Jonathan Safran Foer's Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, which is also a novel about a boy living in New York who survives a terrorist attack. So now let's do quick summary. Now, I don't think actually it will be quick, because the novel has more than 8,000 pages, and honestly, if you want to read it, and I really hope you want to read it, so I recommend to do it just slowly, you know, take step by step, don't rush into it, because it's a wonderful adventure. So remember that Donna started writing because she loves how authors took the reader to this another world, and in each book I feel like she does it more and more profoundly and better. And when I read this book, I had this total involvement in this world, and it was just wonderful living this whole other life. So it is said that with books we can live many lives instead of just one, and about Donna this is certainly true, because the way she involves a reader in this world, it's magnificent. So I don't recommend you like read it in one night, although I know you might want to, because it's highly captivating. Anyway, I'll try to highlight the main events that are happening. Let's begin. So the novel begins with Theo Decker, an adult, being in Amsterdam. He's freaking out because he's hiding from the police, and it is said that he's murdered someone. So like the other Donna's work, the novel just throws us straight into the climax of emotions. We're like, oh my god, what's happening? And then we go back in retrospective to see, like, you might wonder, how did I end up in this situation? And so we see back in his childhood, 13-year-old boy Theo Decker being called to a school meeting with principal, with his mother, because he was smoking outside school and he's in trouble. But before that they still have a little time, so they go to the Met Museum, where they admire different paintings, including the painting which is the center of the whole plot, which is the Goldfinch by Fabricius. So the Goldfinch is a real painting by a Dutch artist, Fabricius. So in fact there are a lot of fascinating true details about art in the story. And so Theodore's mother, Audrey, she knows a lot about art because she studied it, and the Goldfinch is her favorite painting. It is important that this painting has already survived one explosion back in 17th century, the explosion in which its artist died. So Fabricius died in an explosion, but the work survived, and now it is here again, and they're admiring it, and Theodore's mother tells him about how marvelously it is painted. And also in museum they watch some other work from Rembrandt and other artists. And also in museum Theodore encounters a girl, Pippa, who he falls in love with immediately, and they just walk around the museum. And at some point Theo and his mother, they get separated, they go into different halls, and then the terrorist attacks happens and explosion hits, and Theodore then wakes up a while after that, and a dying man, the grandfather of Pippa, that girl, before he dies, he asks Theo, he gives him the painting, the Goldfinch, which fell from the wall, and tells him to keep it, and gives him also his ring, and tells the address of some address, and says to ring the green bell and to go there and to keep the painting, and then he just basically dies. And so 13-year-old Theo, but being hit by explosion, he doesn't know what to do. A dying man just said him to keep some painting, so he just grabs this painting and he's doing his best to find a way out of the building. And when he goes out, he is extremely overwhelmed, obviously, and he goes back home, and he's trying to find his mother, of course, all this time. He wonders where she is. He hopes that she's gone home. He goes home, and he of course doesn't find her there, and he's panicking. Then social service workers come in and they tell him that his mother is dead. And so Theodore, he has no one to stay, because his father, Larry, he left him and his mother to start a new life or whatever. he's not around, he's out of reach. And so social workers basically doesn't know what to do with Theo, and Theo remembers the name like of his friend Andrew Barber, who comes from a quite wealthy family. So social workers, they take Theo there for a while, and for a while Theo just stays with the Barbers. So they take him in, they treat him well, he quite likes it there, although there are a lot of siblings, Andy has a lot of siblings, and they don't particularly like Theo or Andy. Andy is sort of a standoffish in this whole family, like he's nerdy, he doesn't like active sports, doesn't like swimming, and so he and Theo don't get along very well with the other siblings. But nevertheless, the parents of the family treat Theo really well, and so he quite enjoys it. And then at some point he remembers about the store that the old man told him to go to before he died, and so he finds its address and he goes there. The store is called Hobart and Blackwell, and it is an antique store. So he rings the bell and the man opened to him. The man's name is Hobie. Theo tells him this whole crazy story about the painting and the dying man. Hobie confirms, yeah, this man's name was Welty. He was the keeper of the store with Hobie, and also in there. So they come in, they talk, and in there Theo also sees Pippa, so the girl from the museum, who turns out to be the Welty's niece, and she's alright, but she's injured and she's recovering. So they have their moments, there's a little sparkle between them, they hold hands. But Theo learns that Pippa is going away soon to Texas to live with her aunt, so he is quite disappointed by that. Theo's life stabilizes a bit. He starts going to Hobie regularly, just helping out him in an antique store, watching him work. He enjoys his company. He also, as I said, enjoys living with Barbers, and there's even a talk about Barbers adopting Theo. But then all of a sudden Theo's father shows up, so Larry, with his new girlfriend Alexandra, that is with the X in the beginning, and so they show up and they just take Theo away. They take him to Las Vegas, where his father now lives. And so they go to an apartment before that to pick up things, and Theo also takes the painting Goldfinch with him. Las Vegas is no place for a 14-year-old boy. It is described as a hellish place, sort of the opposite of all things moral, all things novel tries to tell the reader. So the house they stay in is really big but badly furnished, and Larry and Alexandra always somewhere at work or whatever they do, and Theo is basically alone, and it is basically a desert. So it is a new apartment in the new building area, and there is nothing around. There are no neighbors around. I mean, there are houses, there are some people, but not Theo's age. And the one boy Theo actually meets there is Boris. So Boris, who play, one of the main characters, he is Ukrainian and Polish, but he's lived all around the world, and he's having quite an influence on Theo. I mean, it's really ambiguous. So basically he just, for one, he saves him from being alone, so the boys become basically inseparable, like a family. But also with Boris' influence, Theo started to use drugs and drink a lot of alcohol. So Theo also goes to school there with Boris, but the school is also like a miles away. You need to go to the bus on it, and in school there are a lot of kids who are doing drugs and deal drugs. So it's not the best place for kids, and Theo finds himself really depressed there. It is also important to say that Boris and Theo, they bond not only because they're two boys living in one area, but also because Boris's father is also an alcoholic, and Boris's mother is also dead. So yeah, this tragedy just pulls them also together. So a whole year passes like this, and Theo is now 15, And Boris meets this girl in school he started dating. He names her Korku, it is her like nickname. And Theo is not so enthusiastic about this because Boris hangs out with him less, and Theo grows more depressed once again. And before that, Boris and Theo had been living a really tough life, so they've been shoplifting and stealing money and food just to get by because their fathers are alcoholics. And Theo's father, he basically lives off just gambling and playing casino and all that stuff, and so they've been living really poorly. But then that time at Christmas, around Christmas, Theo's father suddenly starts being really generous and really involved in Theo's life and Boris, and they all have such a great time together. And him and Boris mostly enjoy talking, and Theo just saying like, yeah, really interesting. Theo's father also takes interests in his son's life, and things at gambling, I suppose, start to going well because he asks for Theo's social account number to put some money to save him for his future studies. And that is really nice of him, really fatherly. On Christmas, Boris and Theo and Father Alexandra, they go to a fancy schmancy restaurant, and they have a really nice dinner, which the characters will recall in the future, like this one of the best Christmas, just this large dinner, a lot of courses. And then Theo's father also gives Boris and Theo $500 each as a present, so things are starting to go well again. But then at one day, a man called Mr. Silver comes to the door, and he meets Theo, and he tells that his father basically is in big trouble and he's wanted by some guys, creditors, I guess. And Theo freaks out, of course, and believes that the painting, the Goldfinch, that is still with him, it is no longer safe at home, so he basically takes it to school and keeps it in a locker. Larry, Theo's father, tells him that he wants to quit gambling for good and open a restaurant, but he just says that he needs a little bit money from Theo to make sure this is opened. And Theo has money because his mother left him money as her will, so yeah, and plus he has all this money on social accounts. And basically Larry, he not just asks nicely like, oh son, can you borrow some money for a restaurant? No, he basically forces him to call to the man who is responsible for Theo's money, and tells him to lie to him and say that he needs this money for studies. And so they try to withdraw the money, but the guy says that they cannot do that and that the money can be transferred only to school directly. Larry looks very overwhelmed and angry and frustrated at this news. The periods in between this, Boris and Theo continue doing a large amount of drugs, and then at one point Mr. Silver comes to the house again, and now he is more determined to get to Theo's father because he says directly that Larry owes them $50,000, and there are lots of mean-looking guys with him. And of course Theo panics, and then later that evening Cassandra says that Larry died in a car crash when he was driving out of town. So basically, father of the year, he just wanted to abandon them all. So Theo is left a complete orphan, and you might notice how dynamic, how unstable and anxious this novel is, because you see event after event, we go in and we get hope and we suddenly drop into despair, and again hope and despair, and this is thrilling. But Cassandra is basically very depressed, and Cassandra, by the way, is also taking drugs, and Larry was taking drugs, and everyone here is taking drugs, but whatever. So Cassandra, she is crying all evening, and her friends come to her and she passes out drunk. And Boris and Theo, also there in the house, they go through her belongings and they found a large amount of money who they decide to keep for themselves, because they still gotta eat something and survive somehow in this situation. Theo decides to go back to New York because he's afraid of silver and he's afraid of the Goldfinch being stolen somehow, and he asks Boris to come with him, but Boris says that he needs more time and Theo has to go like right now. Theo ends up going alone with a dog. So yeah, at some point in Las Vegas, so Cassandra had a dog named Popper, and basically she didn't pay any attention to it, so it's basically Boris's and Theo's dog, and they took care of it all the time. So Theo takes this dog and the painting, and they go to New York. And by the way, before going, Boris gives Theo a goodbye kiss, so there is a romantic relationship between them as well. So Theo arrives in New York. It was a really long ride. He's hidden Popper like in his bag because the dogs weren't allowed, and the driver found out about the dog, and it was all very confusing and long. But finally Theo is in New York, where first thing he runs into Mr. Barber. I mean, what luck! And Mr. Barber was always so nice to him, and you know, such a nice man. So in contrast with Theo's father and with Boris's father, Mr. Barber was presented to us like a, you know, sort of an ideal dad, maybe you could say. But now he just he doesn't recognize Theo. He pushes him away, says no more handouts, and basically looks somewhat delirious and in bad shape. So Theo just goes away, and Theo is in bad shape himself because he's sick, he hasn't eaten well, he just needs a place to rest, and he's in New York and he doesn't know what to do anymore because he comes into New York and he feels that he should feel this this feeling of being home finally, because New York is his home, is his home city, and he grew up there, and so many good memories connected to it. But when he comes there, he basically doesn't recognize the town, and he feels really alone there. And he goes to the only person that he knows and he can stay, so this is Hobie. And he goes to Hobie's door, and Hobie lets him in, of course, and he says that he can stay. And he also finds Pippa there, but Pippa is only on vacation from her school in Switzerland, so she can't stay very long. Hobie allows Theo to stay with him, and they speak to social services about that, and they're also fine with that. And Theo also applies to a early college program, so it could help him stay with Hobie, and it all works out. Although Hobie forces Theo to call Cassandra, so he didn't say he was leaving or anything, or yeah, so like a logical thing to do. And Cassandra scolded Theo on the phone for stealing from him, and also she warns him that he is walking a dangerous path and he became delinquent. But Theo ignores her warnings and just hangs up and never calls her again. And so Theo goes to this college, and he passed his exams really nice, but in college he doesn't have any motivations, any aspirations, any will. He just goes there and he takes minimum classes, and he basically wants nothing from life, and he's doing drugs because, I mean, obviously he's used to that by now. And however, he really enjoys helping Hobie in his store like he did before, and he becomes his sort of apprentice partner. But he's afraid that Hobie at some point will find the Goldfinch, the painting, so he goes and keeps it in a special storage. He just goes there, he pays for a year ahead and never looks at it. So the painting is wrapped in this many layers so not to get any damage, and Theo doesn't open it once. He's too afraid. He just pays for a full year and he abandons it there and just never looks back to it. However, he had many thoughts at this point during different times to tell someone about the painting, to turn it in, but he's too afraid to do that because he was afraid at the very start when he only got this painting from the museum. He was afraid that someone would judge him before like taking it in the first place. And now that so much time has passed, he's convinced that he would go to jail if he tells someone. So although it's a secret that burdens him, he doesn't tell anyone because he doesn't tell Hobie because he also doesn't want Hobie to get in trouble. So this is a really difficult situation. However, the painting Goldfinch, it also has a special meaning to him because of course it is connected so straightforwardly to this trauma, and this was the favorite painting of his mother. And basically he just, back in Las Vegas, he just stares at it for hours. There's something about it that only he has it and no one else can see it, and yeah, so it is kind of sick connection, to be honest. So we take a huge gap here. 8 years pass. Theo is now an adult and he's a business partner, official business partner of Hobie in his store. So once he's walking on the street and he encounters Platt Barber. So Platt Barber is older brother of Andy, and he's the sibling Theo liked least of all, and he used to bully Andy and whatever, but now he seems okay. So they talk, they catch up, and Platt says that Andy and Mr. Baba died while sailing, and he reveals that all this time Mr. Baba had a bipolar disorder, and that on that day it was his manic episode. And it is described really tragically because Andy didn't know how to swim and he wasn't supposed to be there in the first place. Platt takes Theo home to see Mrs. Baba, who was also really nice to Theo back then when he was living with them. And she looks very sad and depressed, but nevertheless she's really glad to see Theo, and Theo's kind of taking care of her. He starts coming around to them, he starts having dinner with them, and he also talks a lot with Kissy, who is Andy and Platt's younger sister, and so they begin a romantic relationship. Concerning his career, so I mentioned that Theo is now an official partner of Hobie, and to be honest, Hobie's business wasn't doing quite well because while the shop was run by Welty, so the old man that died in the explosion, he was a real business shark, so he kept it going. He was really good at talking to people, at selling things. And Hobie, he's more of a master, so he likes repairing things, he likes creating some of his own furniture, he likes taking care of it, but he's not very good at business, so he doesn't really want to sell it, and so he sells these antique luxurious things only to his friends, and the shop is open only a few days a week, a few hours, so of course there is basically no income, and the shop is close to bankrupt. And so Theo takes the business into his own hands, and to gain some money to save the shop from closing, he starts running illegal schemes and tricking customers. He sells them fake things and he tells them that they are real antiques, and sometimes he even sells the things that Hobie creates. And if client takes it, well then good. If client learns that it's fake, Theo apologizes deeply and just repays them. So that way he still earns a good chunk of money and keep the shop running. However, one man, Lucius Reeves, he learns that the furniture Theo sold him is fake, and he doesn't want a refund. He wants to do something about it, and so he basically keeps blackmailing Theo, saying all this weird stuff. And he also tells Theo that he knows that Theo stole the Goldfinch. So Theo is, of course, panicking, but he doesn't tell Hobie, he doesn't tell anyone because he's too afraid. Also, all the while, Theo continues being in love obsessively with Pippa. Pippa now lives in England and dating a man called Everett, but it doesn't stop Theo. Like, when she comes, he always around her, he always buys her things, he's really devoted. But as I said, Kitsy and Theo, they're also things, so Theo knows he can't have Pippa, so he just goes along with Kitsy. He likes her, she likes him. They content each other, they satisfy each other. At that time, Theo finally agrees to a meeting with Lucius Reeve, who has been threatening him, and so they have dinner at a restaurant, and Reeve tells him that the Goldfinch painting, it is being used by some criminals, so it went underground in some business in Miami, and Theo tells that he knows nothing about it. I mean, truthfully, so the painting is stored in a storage and he knows nothing about it, and he doesn't tell anything Reeves, and he doesn't confess anything. But as Reeve won't leave him alone, he confesses to Hobie about the whole scheme that he has been running an antique shop, and Hobie is terrified by that. And Theo also downplays it to a large scale, so he doesn't tell actually how much money he tricked people. But Hobie is still terrified, and he tells him that he needs to stop this immediately and return people their money. A while passes, it's again almost Christmas. Theo and Kitsy are planning their wedding, so they're engaged now, and they're quite happy about it. They do some elaborate plans, and Theo feels that this relationship is really stable and feels reassured by it, he likes it. At one point, walking on the street again, he runs into Boris, of all people, with some woman named Miriam, and so they're really happy to see each other, and they catch up, and they drink, and then they go to Theo's house to see Popper, so remember the dog that is still living with them. And then they go to a club in Queens and they party, and then, so they're drunk, and Boris apologizes to Theo for something Theo doesn't understand. Boris says that he has stolen the Goldfinch from him back in Las Vegas when they were still in high school, and Theo is shocked by it. He's like, no, I have it right here, I have it in storage. And Boris says that he swapped that package, and yeah, so he stole the painting and it is no longer with him, so it really is down in Miami in some criminal business and stuff. And Theo is really mad at Boris, and he goes off, he picks up that package from the storage and he rips it open, and yes, there is a book, there's a school book instead of the painting, and he's of course devastated by it, and he feels so betrayed by Boris, and he's just really angry and finds it unbelievable. Like, all this time this painting has been his anchor, something stable, something, you know, a huge amount is on all his life. I mean, all the worries he spent about, like, someone found out, money he spent for storage, it's just unbelievable for him. However, Boris promises that he will get the painting back. Then again, there are a lot of fateful encounters going on the streets, so Theo suddenly sees Kitsy making out with his old friend Tom Cable on the street, so he confronts her about it, and Kitsy just says, well, look, our marriage is just, it pleases everyone, okay? It pleases you, it pleases me, it pleases my mother, so it's kind of convenient for everyone, so just let's go ahead with it. And they go along with it, and Theo basically, yeah, he still has the marriage, engagement party, everything. However, during these days, Pippa also suddenly arrives in New York because her plane was diverted, and she comes with Everett. And although Theo is really displeased about Everett, he has a great time with Pippa, and he takes her out to movie and dinner, and they talk a lot about their mental well-being, about their lives, and on this meeting just Theo feels overwhelmed with happiness. At the engagement party, some man called Irving comes up to Theo and says that he also knows about the scheme that Theo has been running, and he threatens to expose him. And later Hobie reveals that Irving and Reeve, so they're actually associates who rob elderly people. There is also some shadowy story behind them. Before that they also threatened him, but went by different names. And also at the engagement party, Boris comes up to Theo and just says, yeah, what's up, let's go for a couple of days, let's go out of town. And in the car he tells Theo to take all the money he can, because they're going to Amsterdam to get back the Goldfinch. And so Theo just takes from the cash register in the store $60,000 and just goes away and says nothing to anyone. So in Amsterdam, they meet with some of Boris's associates and they organize this deal. So they plan to pay the money for the painting to the dealers. They need to pretend that Theo is buying the painting. So they go there with guns. Theo, when he notices that Boris has guns, he really panics and stresses out about it, but Boris is like, nah, it's for safety, you know, I mean, you would be stupid there to go there without guns, right? But so they go there, and one of the men in the opposite team from the dealers, he doesn't show up, and Boris and his associate take advantage of it, and they basically just steal the painting without paying for it, just because they have more men, so Boris and Theo and their associates, and only two of guys of the dealers. And so, although they are victorious, Theo is kind of worried because he saw some guy running away. But then they retrieve the painting. Just Theo stares at it with hearts in his eyes. He goes, just everything goes numb for him. He looks at this painting and looks, and it's so precious to him. Boris and them are split up at the parking lot, so Boris and Theo take one car, the other men take another, they go their ways. But then, on the parking lot, Boris and Theo are stopped by two men called Martis and Fritz, and Boris just goes white, he's afraid of them, and they have weapons, and they force Boris to hand over the painting. And so, even though Boris does so, and he gives them the Goldfinch, they still shoot. There's still fire going on, and in critical moment, Theo just saves Boris and everyone by shooting Martin, shooting him dead. And so now Boris is badly injured, so he shots, and Theo is in this delirious state. He can't believe he killed the man. He can't do anything. He's numb. He panics. He's stressed out, and they take a car, and somehow Boris manages to drive them near to town. But at one point they're stuck in traffic, and so Boris just says Theo to get out of the car, to get to the hotel. Don't call him, don't message him, just wait for him there. And Theo does that, and he goes to the hotel, and that is where we match up with the beginning of the novel. So this is the moment described in the very beginning, and it describes Theo in a very bad shape. So he wants to kill himself because he killed a man. He's stressed out about everything. He's paranoid that the police after him. He doesn't contact with any hotel staff, but he looks at them and he wonders if they know and what they know, and he doesn't know a word in Dutch, and so he just looks at newspapers and he can't make out anything, but he's afraid that it says that there are police after him, and Boris doesn't contact him for a long while, and Theo can't go anywhere. He doesn't have his passport, so he can't go away. And just at Christmas time, he decides that he will turn himself in, that he cannot do this any longer, and this is the only right way. And so just when, the Christmas morning, just when he's about to go to police, Boris comes in at the very last moment. Boris comes in and he's very happy, he's in a great mood, he orders a large festive breakfast, and Theo just sits there all the while and like, how do I tell him I'm going to turn to the police right now? But Boris says, well, everything's great. So he anonymously called the authorities and said that he has information about the painting, and even though painting ended up being away from Boris and Theo, Boris knew where the painting is being kept by those criminals, so he contacted the authorities and he said like, yeah, the painting is there, and the authorities went there and they paid Boris a large, enormous, huge sum of money for giving that tip, and they didn't need any further information about who he is or how he knows this. So basically everything's everything's just magical. And the authorities, they retrieved the Goldfinch, and with the Goldfinch they found a lot of other missing paintings, and so this is one of the biggest recoveries in art history in general. And there are a lot of rare paintings by like Rembrandt and famous painters like Iwasowski and stuff. And yeah, so, and Boris just gives a suitcase full of money to Theo with his part of money from it, and they drink, and everything's well, and there is no need to turn to police anymore. And so this is a happy ending for them. And so in the end of it all, Theo comes back to New York, and he comes back to Hobie. Hobie is furious, of course, because Theo left for like a couple of weeks at least, so he took money from cash register, he didn't contact anyone, so Hobie just thought that Theo has left them and robbed them and went away for good. But Theo comes back, and he truthfully tells Hobie the whole story, so the whole truth about the illegal scheme he has been running in shop, the truth about the Goldfinch, and his time in Amsterdam. And so Hobie is struck by it, of course, but he's being understandable and forgiving, and he basically forgives Theo. And Theo spends the next year just traveling around the world and giving back people who he tricked the money for the antiques. He pays them from the money that Boris gave him. So the money that they took from retrieving the Goldfinch, he pays that money to people who he stole from, basically. And in the end, there's a beautiful monologue, beautiful passage about where Theo just reflects, and he thinks that it is beautiful to devote one's life to beautiful objects, and that it connects a person to immortality. Okay, now where we're caught up with the plot, let's talk about the themes. So the first and foremost theme I want to talk about is, of course, the value of the art and beauty. So the art described here as something that gives life a transcendent meaning. So it connects the people to history, it is something stable, you know, it is something that stays for the history, and it has a huge meaning for people, and it can be valued for itself, and then it's beautiful, but it can be also valued for the wrong reasons. So in the Goldfinch, art is not just a part of life, but the main part of its existence. So in Goldfinch, it's what moves the plot forward. So from the very beginning, the explosion. So the terrorists attack Matt, and Theo keeps this painting. So because of it, he feels guilt and fear for keeping it, but he also admires it and loves it and adores it dearly. And he even says, so the painting was the secret that raised me above the surface of life and enabled me to know who I am. So it is also something that helps him to learn about the world and his place in it. The attack on the Met itself, it's what highlights that art is not something indifferent to life and unconnected to life, but it is connected, and it has deep political meaning as well. So all the attacks that are being given on the museums and objects of art, it's what makes them so important to humans. So the attack on the museum itself, it serves as a reminder that art is not something indifferent and apolitical, but on the contrary, all the crimes people commit that are connected to art just prove that art is something that has a deep connection to human life in general. The history of the Goldfinch. So as I said in the beginning, the Goldfinch survived the explosion that happened back in the 17th century. And now in the book it has survived another explosion in New York. And so it shows how works of art are constantly in danger. Theo comes to the conclusion in the end that it is noble and right to devote one's life to the saving of those works, to preserving them, and that it gives the life purpose and connects the person to history and other people who took care of it. Few more quotes. So, in the end of the book, as I said, Theo, when he talks about the immortality of art, he says, "Insofar as it is immortal, and it is, I have a small, bright, immutable part in that immortality." So he finds himself part of the history, part of the community, the sense of belonging to the world which the art creates. Of course, the art also connects Theo to his mother who died and keeps that memory of her, and there's also a tragic connection. So just before she dies, she tells Theo, "People die, sure, but it's so heartbreaking and unnecessary how we lose things." So she refers to artworks as things. And in that aspect, it is very interesting how we often look at being connected and obsessed with things as something bad, as something like don't be so connected to object, don't be afraid to lose things. But the Goldfinch actually states the opposite, that all the feelings that it values so much, that love and friendship, and it's all inevitably connected to loss and instability, and that the things is the things that actually remain in life. And so this is shown in the whole Theo's journey. So all along it, he keeps losing people. He loses his mother, his father, he goes through heartbreak after heartbreak after heartbreak. It's all the while the Goldfinch painting is what he has at all times, and it's always the same beauty, the same, it brings him stability. He just keeps looking at it, and it brings him the sense of comfort. And so the objects of art here are represented as something eternal, as something immortal that survives through the ages despite all tragedies, unlike the human fragile lives. Of course, it is represented here how people can value art for the wrong reasons. So the most obvious one is money. And so we see how terrorists attack the museum, they attack art to make some sort of statement, some sort of threat. And then we see how Theo, when he runs his scheme in an antique shop, when he sells this, he shows that a lot of rich people, they don't care about the art, its authenticity, they just want it because of its status, and it is the wrong reason to value art, and it of course doesn't give any meaning that Theo speaks about. But ultimately, novel comes to the conclusion that despite that there are some people in the world, it doesn't disvalue the fact that art still transforms a lot of people's lives and has a positive and beautiful and healing impact on them. Another topic that is really close to the previous one is fabrication and authenticity. So basically, what we learn is that the authenticity of the art is so important. So we see it most of all through the character of Hobie, who is described as a really dedicated and master who has pure love for his work and what he does, and he appreciates art for the right reasons, and he doesn't care for money or any of it, and he lives purely for art, and it gives him sense of purpose and meaning. And Theo, in fact, he is very impressed by it, and when he's being taken to Hobie as a 13-year-old, he finds this soothing and some stability in this work of art, in creating, crafting, and learning how you can how you can understand if the work is authentic or not, if it's real antique or not. But really, Theo doesn't come to appreciate art, doesn't come to appreciate its authenticity before he loses the Goldfinch. So the Goldfinch he admired so much because of its authenticity, and when the Boris tells him that he stole it and that he didn't have it, so Theo understands how actually important it is to have a real thing. One of the most important outcomes of the whole novel is that actually people give value to things. So as I said, until Theo known that he had no painting, that packed up box in his storage with a school book. It was the most important package in his life. He gave it such a deep, sacred meaning. He valued it so much. And the same thing with fabrication. So when Theo runs his scheme, he sells fake antiques to rich people, and they value them just as much as they would have a real thing, just because they think it's real. And you know, the fact that Theo uses different techniques, so he can damage things here or there to show like, yeah, it's a real thing. You see, it's damaged, so it's been used before, so it's real. And that is what gives the thing its value in the eyes of the other people. So it's again about the people wanting status more than the actual authenticity. And so Theo concludes here, an object, any object, was worth whatever you could get somebody to pay for it. But of course, when he's being blackmailed by Reeve and he's forced to confess the whole scheme to Hobie, when he sees Hobie's terror at this and sees how much he has disappointed him and betrayed the ideals that Hobie had hoped to pass on to him, Theo feels immense guilt and remorse to everything he's done, and he finds that he just can't live anymore with it. He can't keep on doing this, even though some people accepted the works and they didn't find anything wrong with it. He still goes back and confesses to them and gives them back their money because it is so important to Hobie, and because Theo, at that point, he realizes the meaning of a fantasy of itself, and so that is what actually gives art meaning. And so we can draw parallels between Theo and Boris here, because Boris stole painting from Theo, so he tricked him and then he promised to get it back, and he got it back at great personal risk. And Theo, just like that, so he tricked the customers by selling them the fakes, and then he also at great personal risk by confessing to Hobie and then giving back all his money. He also did this sort of redemption act by giving them back the money. And so it is exactly that year of traveling in which Theo comes to this conclusion of the real meaning of art, and when he finds purpose in life. And really, in the end of the novel, Theo finds purpose in his life to devote it to the immortality of beauty. And so Theo's experience teaches the reader that there is no substitute for fantasy. Even if it seems at the moment like there is nothing to replace the real thing. The novel has a big accent on friendship and family. So, as you might have noticed, most of the characters, so Theo, Boris, Andy, Pippa, they all have either dead relatives or they are in a bad relationship with them, and they have family troubles. So there are not a perfect family that's described here. There are all sorts of troubles and misunderstanding and bullying and bad experiences described. But that just emphasizes the value of friendship. So there are a lot of meaningful connections that are described here. So for example, Andy and Theo, who are not real brothers, but they became just like brothers. I mean, of course they live together and basically Theo almost gets adopted, but nevertheless they connect and they support each other very much. And what's more important is, of course, Boris and Theo. It is not clear what's the relationship between them, either it's romantic or it is friendship. But either way, it is not deniable that the friendship they have is the strongest bonds, probably the strongest bonds in the whole novel. They do not replace family for each other, so they cannot be seen as, father figures to each other. But the bond it creates, it's something beautiful of itself. So Boris, who seems to have a bad influence on Theo, like doing drugs and alcohol and shoplifting, actually he has another side to it. So he saves Theo from loneliness, for one, and he helps him to invent this new side of himself to be more free, more cheerful, more happy. And I mean, there is no doubt that Boris actually saves Theo, and even his, survival skills, would Theo find this food on his own? Would he actually, you know, live with his alcoholic father and Alexandra and actually survive? Because, I mean, Boris in some way, I mean, he provided the food. I mean, they of course did shoplifting, but without it, would they survive? They would just have nothing to eat. And also Theo is being very depressed in Las Vegas, as I said. For example, he felt very happy when he was doing drugs, which is not good, of course, but at the same time, Boris said that in those moments that Theo doesn't remember when he was unconscious, he was often doing some suicidal attempts. So he was actually in a very dark place back then. And if it wasn't for Boris, who knows, would Theo survive his teenage years or not? Plus, Boris and Theo are always there for each other. They do everything together, but they also describe how they, you know, even clean up after each other, you know, when they pass an unconscious. So Boris cleans up, I'm sorry for the details, but vomits after Theo, and Theo does the same. Yeah, and they take care of each other and care for each other deeply. And their friendship grows up to the point where it is sort of unconditional love. Because when after all these years they lose touch, and then they come back together and they're so happy to see each other. And even when Theo learns that Boris had betrayed him so deeply and didn't say anything, and I mean, that is a great crime he committed, but he still forgives Boris. And very quickly, in fact, just a couple of days later, they go to Amsterdam together to get the painting back, and their relationship is good as ever. And even after Boris ditches him and goes away for days and leaves him in this hotel where Theo again almost commits suicide, he still doesn't stay at him long. I mean, for one, because Boris tells him the news about the painting and gives him money and stuff, but also he just can't stay mad at him long, so they are at some point family. Also, of course, the novel emphasized greatly the love Theo has for his mother. So even though she died so early, he always looked back to this moment. He, of course, traumatized very greatly by this moment, but he always saw her almost as a saint, he tells. He wants to be like her. Even though later he learns about some of her imperfection, he still adores her greatly. And it is described in the novel how family can ruin a person. So Larry, Theo's father, who is an alcoholic, who possibly ruins his future life by keeping him in that place. There was a line with Theo's grandparents, so he actually had grandparents, and the social workers tried to contact them, but they couldn't because grandparents just didn't want to take Theo in. Also, the Barber's family, which Theo ends up in, although they are described to be so good to Theo, it is actually, as I said, the siblings, they all bully Andy, they bully Theo. There is not a great relationship between them, and Donna describes this family fights and disagreements, and it is not pretty. So despite the fact that the novel admits that family is very important, it also tells that it's also something more of a failure than something successful, and that is highly imperfect, and it's okay to be that way, to have that relationship if you can do nothing about it, that it just happens, and that friendship is the thing that heals a person and that can bring such a positive impact in one's life and has such a deep meaning in every person's life. Another theme that is quite vague and philosophical, but it is hope, despair, fate, luck, many words. I'll try to explain it now. You might have noticed how through the novel we are constantly on the swings. So we go up and down, up and down. It is, as I mentioned, somewhere in between the plot summary. It keeps you on edge. It is nervous. So firstly, we're being put straight into despair. So we start with the despair, with the start in Amsterdam when Theo in this panic state. Then we go back, we see that, oh, okay, Theo, his mother, everything's fine. Then the attack on the museum, explosions, bombshell, everything's bad, despair. Theo is taken to Barber's. So okay, maybe they will keep him, maybe it will be alright. Theo is taken with himself to Las Vegas. Despair, big despair. Theo starts to take drugs to cope with it somehow. Then he's going to New York. He stays with Holby. Okay, everything's good. Then Reeve comes in. Maybe it will all, and you know, this pattern, up and down, up and down. Theo mentions another paradoxical gem of my dad's. Sometimes you have to lose to win. And so this is where we come to fate, and that all this up and downs, it is basically the idea that everything that is happening for the best. Because even when you have such tragic events, they can lead to something good. And that is what Boris tells Theo in the end of the novel. So it is almost like Theo was meant to steal that painting in the very beginning, because at the very end it led to something so great as to discovery of many other missing works, and so they were taken back to the museums, and that is such a good thing for the community, for the art, for the history, for the world. The idea behind this book that fate plays a large role here, and everything's kind of random, but basically all that is done for the best. And so the last topic, the juiciest one, just as I love, immorality and crime. So you smell that? It's something, it's given Dostoyevsky, right? It's given The Secret History. Okay, here's the idea. Not everything that is illegal is immoral, and not that is moral is legal. Something like that. So the first legal thing that Theo does in the very beginning of the novel, so when he is being called to school with his mother for smoking, so for breaking rules, and then it somehow leads to his mother's death. I mean, yeah, very superficially, but it does. And Theo feels guilty for her death. He says that he's sure that he is the reason of that death, so him breaking rules leads to her death. The second one, so the main one, Theo stealing a goldfinch, very criminal, very illegal. But is it so immoral? I mean, he's doing a dying man's last wish, and he's 13, and he is damaged by trauma and explosions, and what was he left to do then? But he still feels very guilty for doing something so criminal, and that is the reason he doesn't surrender the painting, although that would be the moral thing to do. And then when Boris and Theo, they do shoplifting and drugs, it is illegal and it is immoral, but they do that to survive, and you know, that's something that actually bonds them and keeps them alive. So it's such ambiguous and difficult topics to talk about, but they are undeniably connected, and this connection is the theme of the novel. And so then when Theo is in New York, and he calls Cassandra to tell her that he's in New York, and Cassandra tells him that he's headed down a dangerous road and he will end up in prison, stuff like that. And I mean, she's wrong, because Theo didn't end up in prison, but there was a truth to her words, perhaps because Theo is used to this thin line between morality and immorality and doing a lot of illegal things. That is why he finds it more easier to keep doing drugs in New York, even though he doesn't have to anymore. He has a normal life and he can stay clean, and doing this whole illegal scheme with a shop. I mean, tricking customers, he didn't have to do that. There was no reason for him to, I mean, he was in a difficult situation, so the shop needed money, but there were a lot of other ways, a lot of legal ways to talk to Hobby, to do the right thing, but he still doesn't do that because he's kind of already used to the easy way. But there are of course pure examples of matching, so immorality with criminal activities and morality and good citizen behavior. So the example of the fully wrong road is Larry, Theo's father, who is a gambler, who's doing drugs. He takes no care of his son, he takes no responsibility for his actions, he wants to ditch the family and just ride off, and he dies, and he gets, I mean, what he deserves. And then there's Theo, who always wants to right his wrongs and redeem himself and help people, and in the end he does the right thing, so he gives back the money to people he stole from, and that is what brings him this sense of completion of ethical duty and That is why he's being rewarded with him finding his meaning in life and being in essence happy. Okay, we're through with the themes, but today we have a few more additional parts to the video. So the Goldfinch, of course, is highly appreciated all around the world, and I want to talk about why it is so special to the world, why it has won so many awards. And one of the reasons for that is not only highly captivating plots and all the themes and the mastership of Donna, but also her mastership in using writing, in using lexical stylistics in the genre of novel in general. I want to give some examples of Donna using lexical stylistic techniques. The language she uses, it's beautiful, and it is what immerses the reading into the atmosphere, into the book so well. So the language of novel is very abundant, very expressive, and I want to talk about the instruments that help to achieve that. And the brightest amongst them are epithet, hyperbole, metaphor, oxymoron, and comparison. And I'm telling you that based on a paper of Klegna Alfia Abramovna and Radiohead Maria Borisovna. I will send you the link down the video description so you can see the original. But right now, let me give you some examples. So comparison is when we compare one object to another. So for example, as I said, Theo's mother is a very important person to him, and he compares her to a saint. I remember thinking that this must be how people felt after a vision of saints. Not that my mother was a saint, only that her appearance had been as distant, as startling as a flame leaping up in a dark room. And so he compares her appearance to a flame in a dark room. It's very beautiful, and you get it, don't you? You understand what he means, and that allows us to read Donna's characters so clearly, to understand them so deeply. Another example of that: looking at the sky of a park avenue, blue, black and threatening, a roiling sky straight from a painting of Calvary. I imagine her looking out at the same dark sky from her airplane window. So here Theo talks about Pipa, and the dark sky here is what represents his tangled and mixed and complicated feelings for her and their inability to be together. And so Theo Decker, during the whole novel, he's described as this very emotional character who sees the world not as really real, but as a painting, you know, as art, as something subjective, like an artist who paints his picture, and he's doing that not to show the reality as it really is, not like a photograph, but there's something from his mind, and we see that in the ways, in the metaphors that Theo describes his feelings. For example, another one about Pipa. For years I'd been walling in a hot house of wasteful sorrow. Pipa, Pipa, Pipa. Exhilaration and despair that was never ending. Incidents of virtually no significance threw me to the stars or plunged me into speechless depressions. Her name on my phone, or an email saying loved, which was how Pipa sent all of her emails to everyone, had me flying for days, whereas... I mean, wow. I mean, it blows my mind. I mean, you can feel the pain, the heartbreak that he feels, right? Another tool that helps with the expression of emotions is of course epithets, which is basically an adjective that describes an object, and it is something we're really used to, but is still very meaningful. For example, Theo described quick, mysterious dreams of his mother. And another more interesting example is a delicious wave of relief when he thinks that his mother is still alive. And I mean, just think about it. Delicious. The hyperbole is also used to describe Theo's emotions, especially to describe the psychological time, which is something we'll talk about just in a minute or two. But let's just take a look at it. So, although the walk home took forever, I don't remember much about it. And over I kept thinking, I've got to go home, and then for the millionth time, I can't. And it seemed that I stood for ages listening to the faraway echo, though there was probably no time at all. So yeah, it highlights the ages and millionth time and so long and no time at all, shows you his emotion and frustration and anger and grief and all at once. And the last lexical advice we'll talk about, but my personal favorite, the most interesting, though it's most rarely used in novels, so less than all the described before. Anyway, that is oxymoron. Oxymoron is when we describe an object with two definitions which contradict each other, which contradict logic. So let's take a look at it. I knew I couldn't turn around, that to look at her directly was to violate the laws of her world and mine. She had come to me the only way she could, and our eyes met in the glass for a long, still moment. So long, still moment. You see, Theo describes his mother coming to him in a dream. So again, this quick but long feeling of seeing her. Another moment which shows the grief that Theo feels for his mother, and when Donna uses oxymoron, is for weeks I'd been frozen, sealed off. Now in the shower I would turn up the water as hard as it would go and howl silently. So howl silently, I mean, don't you just sometimes, you see how I mean, it's two words, but you get his emotions so clearly. And going back to the beginning, I want to talk about Bildungsroman. So as I said, it's a novel about a hero growing up, overcoming obstacles, going from a child to an adult. And that was largely used in the 19th century. So the main features of a Bildungsroman is 1. Focus on the hero that is growing up, so focus on his psychology, on his inner thoughts, not on the action outside. And that goes into feature 2, which is a vague sense of time. So here in the novel we have a what is called psychological time, where Donna doesn't give us the exact dates. So it is the time frames she gives us are being used to the contribution to the plot. So next morning, that's Sunday, that's next week, so we don't know when that's happening. So we have some comprehension, like, yeah, okay, here Theo is 13 and then he's about 14, it's been a year or 2 or 8 years. So Donna uses she's like an artist. So like Fabricius, in his painting, he sometimes uses really large strokes of paint and it's all really in big brushes, and then sometimes he uses tiny, really accurate, like he describes every detail, and Donna does just that, but in her novel. So some moments she describes, you know, these long still moments, so she describes them really profoundly, and she can describe one moment for pages and then 8 years in a flash. So it is the second aspect, the psychological time. Third aspect is a retrospective. So basically there are 3 purposes for which the retrospective is used. So 1 is to give the reader some new information. Second is to look at that information, but from the future, so with some new knowledge to reflect on it. And the third is to turn the attention of the reader to the details which are important to that specific moment in the novel right now, but which were described before. So Donna uses retrospective for all these 3 parts. So for the example, we start with Amsterdam, so we'll be in Rome, so we give some new information. Okay, a lot of new information, something's happening. But then the hero, Theo, he thinks a lot about his mother. And that is used to describe how much she means to him, how much she affects his life and his action and his motivation in the novel. And so remembering her and going back through these memories with her, he comprehends them in a different way, in different light after her death, not as what they seem before. And so in the very beginning, Theo thinks that, like, if it hadn't been for that, if it had been for her death, that would be a completely ordinary day. I wouldn't remember, but now I remember everything so vividly. And so yeah, he reflects on that with new circumstances. And the third aspect about the memories being important in a certain moment of the time. So for example, when Theo spends his Thanksgiving in Las Vegas with Boris, he remembers Thanksgiving he spent with his mother and he compares the 2 things. Or when Theo, as an adult, he meets other women, he tries to connect with people somehow, and he constantly goes back to Pippa in his mind and he compares her to everyone, going over and over again. So that is to say about retrospective. And the fourth aspect is it's about a hero finding his purpose in the end, so some kind of moral outtake. So an American professor, Richard Beard, actually told about the Bildungsroman that the protagonists in these books cannot fulfill their personal journey unless they come across certain crucial concerns such as vocation, religion, mating, and identity. And of course, through this numerous trial, all of this was to say, all of these meetings, you know, almost every meeting Theo goes through here is faithful to him somehow. It teaches him a lesson, and that is what brings him to moral and spiritual adulthood in the end, and about comprehension of his individuality and, of course, finding a purpose in life, and of course to a big conclusion. So in the end, there's a big, really big monologue when he reflects on all that, and comes, of course, to the conclusion about the immortality of art. Okay, and the last thing to talk about is, of course, the legacy of the book. Are there any movies? Well, in fact, there is, but it's not such a good news as you might have thought. So you might know about the movie that came out in 2019, The Goldfinch, which is, of course, about the book, and there's a Finn Wolfhard starring in it, and the picture might look pretty, might be picturesque, but there's a scandalous story behind it. So Donna had a literature agent, a very famous one, Amanda Urban, and she, without Donna's knowing it, without her consent, she just sold the rights for the book to a film studio. And although it brought Donna $3 million, Donna had no rights in participation in making of a film, and Donna was very frustrated and angry with it, and so she ended up changing her literature agent, and the literature community, they didn't, they were shocked by it, like Amanda Urban was such a high-knowledge agent, but yeah, Donna just couldn't take it. And basically, when the film came out, it wasn't so great. I mean, in my opinion, and Donna, it is said that Donna wasn't quite pleased by it, and yeah, so this is quite a sad story. But it's up to you whether to watch it or not. I mean, maybe you would like it, and I'd be happy if you did, because we all like different things. And even though if I say if something is not right, maybe you will say it's perfect, and that will be completely fine. I hope you enjoy the book or the film or whatever you like. That is it for today. I was so excited to talk about this book. I haven't seen it. I mean, I've been talking here for hours, to be honest, and I haven't even noticed it. But yeah, I was delighted to do that. This is one of my favorite books. It is really great. Of course, I highly recommend you to read it. Just please do that. It is so awesome. I hope I gave you some motivation to do so. Yeah, so go to my Instagram, go to my Telegram channel, connect me, tell me what you think, tell me if you want me to do some of your favorite books. I will be glad for some advices. In fact, one of you recommended me to review this book. So share your opinion, tell me all you think about this book, about the characters, about what you think of art. Do you have a favorite artist? Do you go to museums often these days? Yeah, I'll be very, very excited to talk to you. But that's it for now, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. And it's illusion, and one of its distinct and